So, hello guys, how are you? Hopefully you are doing well. First and foremost, let me say something about myself. My name is Nurbek and I'm a teacher in Kyrgyz European faculty of Osh State University. I teach forensic science, or as we say, criminalistics. So today I'm going to conduct online class. Of course, it's our first class, therefore, I will briefly talk about the initial concepts and methods of criminalistics or forensic science. So, you can see on my screen. So, as you see, forensic science is a criminalistics. Today, our topic is the history of forensic science, the subject, object, and the system and methodology of forensic science. The lecture number one, the history of forensic science, I told before, the purpose of the lecture to highlight or to emphasize the historical moments for the emergence of forensic science, the stage of the consolidation of forensic knowledge and their registration in forensic science, and also that to reveal the conceptual apparatus of forensic science in an academic discipline, the object and subject of its study, the complex of general scientific and special methods used in forensic science, the structural content of this discipline to designate the general and special task of forensic science. So in our lecture, we will consider such questions: the history of development of forensic science, the subject, the system of our discipline, the general or special task of our subject, and the last question is methods of scientific research of forensic science as a way to solve the problems facing it. So let me start presentation. So as you see on my screen, the question is number one, the history development of forensic science. The history. Forensic science has more than a century of history. The ancient world lacked normalized forensic practice, which enabled the criminals to escape their punishment. Criminal investigation and trials relied heavily on forced confessions and witness testimony. However, ancient sources do contain several accounts of techniques that foreshadow concepts in forensic science developed centuries later. The development of science and technology in the 19th century in the countries of Europe and America led to the emergence of such a social phenomenon as professional organized crime, which began to use the latest means of technology and communication. Armed with the latest means of communication, transport, other equipment, using increasingly sophisticated methods of committing and concealing crimes, organized crime in the 19th century swept the developed countries of North America, Western Europe. For some time, state bodies were not able to fight crime with the old means and methods, which led to the emergence at the end of the 19th century of a new branch of scientific knowledge as forensic science or criminalistic, were the Austrian forensic investigator or criminalistic investigator who later became a university professor, Gans Gross, in the late 19th century, called this subject criminalistics, or as we say, forensic science. It's the same meaning. The activity had three areas. The first, this activity, the criminalistics, has three areas. The first, develop and improve criminal registration and criminal tracing. In the direction side, were carried out in the field of anthropometry, fingerprinting, description of human appearance, photography. The second area is develop scientific methods for researching physical evidence. The second direction is the development of method of research of physical evidence as forensic photography, verbal portrait, classification of the main types of papillary patterns. And third, the last area is the direction is develop and organize the methods and method of organizing and planning investigation, tools, techniques, and methods for detecting, fixing, and using evidence. Due to the growth of crime in the second half of the 19th century in almost all European countries, all means, techniques, and methods of crime investigation, which were used mainly without any strict scientific system, no longer allowed to provide the desired effect in the fight against quantitatively and qualitatively changing crime. At the same time, the accumulated forensic knowledge objectively required generalization, scientific comprehension, systematization, and effective natural enforcement. So, the Austrian scientist Ganz Gross was the first who tried to solve this problem, who had experience in investigative work. At the same time, was well versed in the foundation of many natural sciences, was seriously engaged in photography and microscopy. Having summarized his experience in the investigation and use of the data from natural sciences, as well as having studied the existing basic means and method of investigation in all scientific works on forensic science published by that time, Gross in 1892 wrote the book A Guide for Forensic Investigators as a System of Forensic Science, in which he proclaimed the birth of a new independent science, calling it criminology or criminalistics. Ganz Gross revealed his understanding of forensic science, its content. The task it faced, the subject of research, showed the possibilities of using scientific and technical means to research for traces of a crime and develop individual techniques and methods of investigation. Gross is recognized as the founder of forensic science, or as we used to say, criminalistic. He is the father of criminalistic, he was the first person who discovered this branch of science. Gan Gross was born in 1847 till 1915, Austrian lawyer, founder of Western European forensic science and forensic psychology. As a forensic investigator, Gross was one of the who the first applied in the practice special knowledge from the field of natural science, transforming the art of crime investigation into a system of scientific knowledge. Generalization of the advanced experience and the available individual scientific developments allowed Gross to formulate a number of important theoretical provisions united by him under the name the system of criminalistics. From the Latin crime, it means crime. The most important works of the Gross is a guide for forensic investigators as a system of criminalistics. It was launched 1822. Also, the second book is Criminal Psychology, which was published in 1915. So the next important figure of development of the forensic science is Alphonse Bertillon. His father, Alphonse Bertillon, the father of anthropometry, he was born in April 23 in 1853, Paris in France, and died in February 19, 1914 in France. He was a chief of criminal He was the chief of criminal identification for the Paris police from 1880, who developed an identification system known as anthropometry, or the Bertillon system, that came into wide use in France and other countries. He developed a system to distinguish one individual person from another based on certain body measurements. So, Alphonse Bertillon. Forensic anthropology is a subfield of physical anthropology that applies anatomical science to law. Scientists examine skeletal remains, usually human, to aid the law enforcement with investigations. They identify human remains, interpret trauma and how it occurred, and provide an estimation of how long disease a subject may be. So the next is Francis Galton. Francis Galton, he was born in 1822 till 1911. He was the father of fingerprinting. He was he developed fingerprinting as a way to uniquely identify individuals. So there is amazing fact that Galton calculated that the change of a false positive, who two different individuals having the same fingerprints, was about 1 in 64 million. That is an interesting fact. So further development of fingerprints belongs to Sir William James Herschel. William James Herschel is considered one of the first Europeans to recognize the value of fingerprints for identification purpose. He began using fingerprints and handprints instead of signatures. In his work as a magistrate in colonial India in the 1850s and 1860s, he later collaborated with scientific Francis Galton, whose work led to establishing the first fingerprint classification system implemented by Scotland Yard in 1901. Herschel had always been fascinated by fingerprints. As a young man, he collected the fingerprints of his family members and friends as mementos, noticing that each impression was unique to each person and that his patterns didn't change with age. In 1858, when he went to work in India as chief magistrate, Herschel found himself looking for a way to seal a contract with a local businessman. He asked for the man's handprint, and this unique method of signature secured Herschel's deal. Subsequently, Herschel began using handprints and then fingerprints on pensions, deeds, and jail warrants as a way to prevent fraud in a society where illiteracy was high. He recognized that fingerprints were unique and permanent. Herschel documented his own fingerprints over his lifetime to prove permanence. He was also credited with being the first person to use fingerprints in a practical manner. Also credited with being the first person to use fingerprints in a practical manner as early as the 1850s, working as a British officer to the Indian Civil Service in Bengal region of India. He started putting fingerprints on contracts. So the next figure, also the important figure in development of forensic science is Leona Lecas. He is the father of blood stain identification. He developed a procedure for determining the blood type A, B, AB, or O, or a dried blood stain. Or as we used to say in our country, the group of blood, the first group, first positive or negative, and others. So the next figure is Calvin Goddard. He was born in 1891 till 1950. He used a compression microscope to determine if a bullet was fired from a specific gun. He published a study of tool marks on bullets. He is a father of ballistics. Fields of studies, ballistics, Henry Goddard at the Scotland Yard pioneered the use of bullet comparison in 1835. He noticed a flaw in the bullet that killed the victim and was able to trace this back to the mold that was used in the manufacturing processes. So, and there are other individuals who have made significant contributions to the development of forensic science. And we'll study each of them separately in our follows classes, in our subsequent classes. So now we are moving on to the second question. The second question, the subject and object of forensic science, also the concepts and the purpose of this discipline. We'll talk of it. So it's, as you know, it's a very difficult to provide an exact definition of criminalistics or the extent of its application, as it varies from one location or country to another. However, the American Board of Criminalistics defines criminalistic as the profession and the scientific discipline directed to the recognition, identification, individualization, and evaluation of physical evidence by application of the physical and natural sciences to law sciences matter. Forensic science is a broad field with varying areas. Forensic scientists help law enforcement by analyzing evidence and determining the details of crime scene. So what is the forensic science? So forensic science applies science to both criminal and civil law. Criminal investigators use forensic science to discover how crime scenes unfold. They study evidence such as fingerprints and DNA to determine causes and uncover the responsible parties. Investigators also use forensic science to revisit old cases, saving innocent from prison. So, as you see, criminalistic can be defined as the application of scientific method to the recognition, collection, identification, and comparison of physical evidence, which generated by criminal or legal civil activity. It also involves the reconstruction of such events by evaluation of the physical evidence and the crime. So, criminalistics, what does it mean? Criminalistic, from the Latin crime or criminalis, it means criminal. This is an area of scientific knowledge about the mechanism of crime, the occurrences of information about crime, patterns of gathering, research, evaluation of the use of evidence, and based on the knowledge of these laws of special means and methods of disclosure, investigation, and prevention of crimes. So the purpose of forensic science is complete and timely technical and forensic support and support for the disclosure and investigation of crimes. This goal is realized on the basis of the comprehensive use of the achievements of modern science and technology. Forensic science provides the activities of the bodies of inquiry, preliminary, and investigation, the court, and accompanies the process of forensic examination with well thought out means, techniques, and method of combating crime. So, the subject of forensic science. The subject of forensic science is the laws of the mechanism of crime, collection, research, and evaluation of evidence, and based on the knowledge of these laws, special methods, means of investigation and prevention of crimes. The object of forensic science consists of two parts: criminal activity and the activity of law enforcement agencies in the disclosure and prevention of crimes. These type of activities are objects of study not only in forensic science, but also in other sciences, including criminal procedure, forensic statistics, and others. But each science studies this object to solve its problem. So the object of forensic science is the functional side of illegal activity, the system of action and relation that constitutes the content of the crime mechanism. The mechanism of the crime is a complex dynamic system that includes the subject of the crime, his attitude to his action and their consequences to accomplish subject of encroachment, method of committing and concealing a crime, criminal result. So that's all for the second question. Now we're moving on the third question, the system of forensic science or criminalistic. So the system of modern forensic science includes four structural elements. It consists of four structural elements. The first is theory and methodology of forensic science. The second is forensic techniques. The third is forensic tactics and forensic methods for investigating certain types of crimes. So the general theory and methodology of forensic science, the first part of the system of our discipline. So general theory and methodology of forensic science is a system of its theoretical concepts, methodological principles and concepts as a structural part of forensic science. It includes sections that in aggregate give a certain idea of the main theoretical and methodological aspects of the subject of forensic science, its conceptual apparatus, general theoretical issues of planning and organizing and investigation, and the historical development of forensic science. This part covers such chapters of criminalistics as the concept and scientific basis of forensic identification, the concept and task of forensic diagnostics, forensic photography and video recording, forensic doctrine of traces or traceology, forensic examination of external signs of a person, it calls gabitoscopy, and forensic investigation of human odor traces or odorology. So the second part of our system is forensic technology. It's a section of forensic science which is a system of theoretical provisions and principles for the development and application of scientific and technical means and methods for detecting, fixing, seizing, accumulating, and processing materialized information about the event under investigation, as well as technical means and method for preventing crimes. The main purpose of forensic technology is to detect and study information about the crime committed contained in the properties of the material environment of the event being investigated. So the next part is the third. This part covers such chapters of criminalistics as forensic version and investigation planning, tactics of investigative examination, search and seizure tactics, interrogation and confrontation tactics, presentation tactics for identification, and others. So the next part is forensic tactics. Forensic tactics, So forensic tactics is a section of forensic science which is a system of theoretical provision, and practical recommendation for organizing and planning an investigation. The main task of forensic tactics is to equip forensic activities with the necessary tactical arsenal in accordance with the objectives of the investigation based on the most rational construction of system of relationships and interaction of the participant in the investigation process. This part covers such chapters of criminalistics as investigation of crimes, uh, again, investigation of crimes against life and health and others. The forensic techniques for investigation certain types of crime is our last part of system, our forensic science. This section contains a system of scientific provision and recommendation developed on their basis for the organization and implementation of the investigation and prevention of certain types of crime. This chapter covers the investigation of crimes against sexual inviolability and sexual freedom of the individual, such as investigation of rape and sexual assault. Also, investigation of crimes against property, theft, robbery, and others. Investigation of crimes in the field of economic activity, like illegal business and smuggling. So, also, there are investigation of crimes against public safety and public order, like investigation of banditry and so on. So that's all for the question number 3. We are moving on the first question, the general and special task of forensic science or criminalistics. The forensic task. The first is general. General task is assistant to law enforcement agency in the disclosure, investigation, and prevention of crimes. The special task, further development of general and specific theories of science, improvement of technical and forensic support for the investigation of crimes, improving the organizational, tactical, and methodological foundation of the preliminary and judicial investigation, studying the achievement of foreign criminologists in order to introduce them into the domestic practice of combating crime. It's what about the task of our discipline? The last question, method of scientific research of forensic science as a way to solve the problem facing it. As you see on my screen, forensic method consists of 2 groups. The first group is the general scientific method, a method used in all scenes and areas of practice. These include observation, description, comparison, experiment, modeling, reconstruction, mathematical methods, measurement, calculating, geometric construction, mathematical modeling, and others. The special methods divided into 2 groups. The first is proper forensic and special method of other sciences. Is like proper forensic are developed by forensic science and are intended for its cognitive and practical purpose. These include the technical and forensic method of forensic photography, traceology, fingerprinting, handwriting, and others. Structural and forensic method of planning and investigation, conducting tactical combining, forensic algorithms, and others. So there are special methods. Special methods includes physical, chemical method intended for the analysis of morphology, external structure, composition, elemental molecular structure, physical and chemical properties of substance and materials. Biological method, study of trace of biogenes, blood epidermal particles, secretion, hair, plant particles, anthropological and anthropometric method, identification of the person by bone remains when searching for a person, and developing criteria for subsequent identification. Sociological method, for example, questioning when studying criminal cases or interviewing law enforcement officials. The objectives of these studies are usually to study the case or and condition conducive to the commission and the concealment of crimes, analysis of the method of crime, collection of information on the effectiveness of certain tactics and recommendations. So physical methods used in the development of tactical techniques and combination. So forensic science, due its special purpose, is unthinkable without an inextricable connection with criminal procedural and criminal law science, criminology, and operational search activities. Historically, forensic science originated precisely with the framework of criminal procedural science, and a significant part of the theoretical foundation of forensic science, its practical recommendations are based on criminal procedural knowledge about the essence of evidence, method of obtaining and proving them, the limits of proof, the relevance and admissibility of evidence, principles and rules of assessment, their reliability and significance for establishing the circumstances of the subject of proof. So this is all for today. And to sum up of our topic, I would like to say that forensic science is a science that promotes, through its provisions, the activities of law enforcement agencies in establishing the truth in legal proceedings, administering justice, and preventing crime. Forensic science was systematized and took shape as a science by the end of the 19th century. The term forensic science was introduced into scientific calculation by Gans Gross in 1898. It has an applied character, a synthetic nature, as it has incorporated the provisions of many areas of knowledge, including natural and technical sciences. The object of forensic science is criminal and law enforcement human activity. The subject is the patterns in the mechanism of crime, in the emergence of information about the crime and its participants, patterns arising from the collection, research, evaluation, and use of evidence and special methods and means of forensic research and crime prevention based on the knowledge of these patterns. Uses general scientific and special methods. It's like structurally it includes four interrelated elements: general theory and methodology, forensic techniques, forensic tactics, forensic methods for investigating certain types of crime. And I'm afraid that's all for today. I hope that we'll see you in our follow classes. So if you have any questions, you can leave below on comments, and I will try to answer for each of your questions. So I would like to say that it's our first class, so I shortly talk about the history, about the heroes, about the figures who developed the criminalistics, also the concepts, object, and subject of our discipline. So what I want to say, so take care of yourself, be strong, stay safe. See you next time in our classes. So goodbye.
Vou registrar algo.